It's great to see you all here. I think when it comes to mental health issues, it's something that has touched us all in one way or another, whether it's a friend or a family member or ourselves. It is something that relates to what I would say would be a first article theology. And when you think about the first article that we just said in church this morning, we believe in God the Father, maker of heaven and earth. And what does that mean? Well, it means that God has created us. It means that He's given us our body and life, our reason and all our faculties, and He still preserves these things, both spiritually and through the means of grace, and also physically as He cares for us through doctors and medical resources. So it's about the first article, and we give thanks then for this chance to grow in God's Word together. As we welcome Dean Marzovka is a Christian with a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, and is a Wisconsin licensed independent clinical social worker. He has 25 years of clinical practice in various roles ranging from individual and family work to clinic supervisor and private practice. He's currently serving us as the IT, what's your title exactly?
Media specialist, I think that's what they call me.
All right.
Librarian.
Slash librarian.
Slash librarian.
Okay. At ILC, he's the IT guy at ILC. But definitely know that Dean helps out in a variety of ways to any number of Christians and pastors too. He's kind of that guy you might call up out of the blue if you want some advice. So we welcome Dean, and we give thanks that the Lord has brought him here today. Thanks, Dean.
Just going to start off. After 25 years of working clinically, working with people who have a whole range of mental health issues, and sometimes not always mental health issues, sometimes marital issues or family issues, I'm drawn to the same conclusion over and over again, that Christ is an amazing, amazing God. And what He brings to our party, what He gave to us, how He created us, how He designed us, is, to say the least, incredibly interesting, fascinating, if you will. About a year ago, my wife died of cancer. So when I speak of depression, I know of what I'm speaking. The cancer that took her life, she struggled with for about 15 years. We as a family struggled with it for about 15 years. So it had a profound impact on us as individuals, as family, as children of Christ. So with that in the background, I kind of want to start off here. I have to ask you a couple of questions. I'll try not to move around too much. I'm trying to stay on camera here. I have to ask you a couple of questions. They're rhetorical questions, but just answer them in your own mind. The first question that I have to ask, and it's really important that you kind of evaluate this in your own mind, how do you perceive God? What's your perception of God? Now, some folks, they come thinking that God is an angry God, and He is a judgmental God, and He is a jealous, righteous God. He is all of those. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to minimize that. I'm not going that whole humanistic route where, no, really He's not. No, He is. He is. And He's slow to anger, but once He gets angry, yeah, we got to watch out, because things get real miserable in our lives really quick. Or, the other hand, because this is important, so we have on one side, we have people who believe that God is an angry God, and He's righteous in His anger. Okay? Now, on the other side is God is a loving God. And pretty much anything I do is okay, God's going to forgive me. And what I'm going to ask you to do during the course of this presentation is, if you happen to be over here in your perceptions of God, where He's an angry God, I'm going to ask you to move a little bit this way toward the loving God. And if you happen to be way over here and you think that pretty much you can do anything you want and it's all good with God, I need you to move a little bit this way. And the reason why I'm doing this is because as I talk, as I give this presentation, I'm going to talk about depression. I'm going to talk about mental illness. And some of you are going to go, wait a minute, God's judging me. That's where my depression comes out of. That's where my pain comes out of. But you gotta remember, then I'm gonna ask you to scooch over a little bit to the loving God. But if your depression comes out of a sense of, you know what, I just party all the time. God's gonna forgive me. I do what it is that I wanna do, when I wanna do it, and I don't worry about that. Then I'm gonna say, oh no, I need to introduce you to this side of God. And God is very comfortable with law and gospel, Old Testament, New Testament. It's probably sounding vaguely familiar, and you've all just eaten, and you're like, oh, I just want to go to sleep. You order. Okay, so I'll try not to lull you to sleep too badly. Depression. I need to define for you what depression is. One more thing I need to say before I get to a definition of depression. Some of you have met my daughter, Michael. Michael's a wonderful girl. She's 21 years old at this time. She's getting ready to go off to Europe. Very successful, very bright girl. But I'm going to take you back about a decade. She's 13 years old at this time with this story, I'm going to tell you. And she gets a hold of what psychologists and psychotherapists call the DSM series. The DSM series, Diagnostical and Statistical Manual 4. It contains every mental illness ever known. Some of them even, I think they're made up and they just put them in there, but really it's all full of these mental illnesses and their diagnostic criteria in the minutia. I mean, will manifest this type of symptom this many times a day, blood levels, the whole 9 yards. Okay. My 13-year-old daughter gets a hold of this book, and my wife, who was a clinician, she kind of nudges me and she goes, look up there. And I look, and Michael's in a hammock in our backyard reading the DSM-4. Okay, nobody reads the DSM-4. Now keep in mind, she's 13 years old. She's already wired for drama on a good day. Just on a good day, she's dramatic. And she starts reading this book. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning. And we, hey Michael, time for lunch. Yeah, I'll be in a minute. We ended up taking out lunch to her, and she's kind of eating and reading this book. And my wife and I are like, what do you think? Oh, just let her go, see what happens. So about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, she finally rolls up to the back of the house. She comes up and she looks at me and she has these wide eyes and she's just like, Dad, and she's handing me this book and she says, I have all of these. and I hugged her and I said, yes, you do, honey. Because she's an adolescent. And she does have all of those at any given moment. And the reason why I tell you this story is, one, because it's funny, but the other part of it is that as I speak to depression, you're going to say, hey, wait a minute, that's me. Just, no, I do that sometimes. I feel bad sometimes, or sometimes I'm really apathetic. But that doesn't mean we're depressed. Could mean we're sad. Doesn't mean we're depressed, like, as in a clinical medical depression. But when all of them come together at the same time, over a period of time, then that's when the diagnostic criteria kicks in. So if you do get a hold of this, and as you're watching and you're listening, and you're thinking, wait a minute, that's me, that's me, and then you start doing the math, it's about a combination of symptoms and time. Time is a critical component to all of this. Toward the end, there will be a brief segment in here on suicide and suicide ideation. And I need to make some delineations there between depressed people and suicidal people. There's a world of difference between these folks. And then in the end, I offer the scientific reasons for depression that the researchers and all mental health therapists, all doctors say, yep, that's the reason. And then I'm going to speak to, we went over it today in church, Genesis, because I can tell you, at least from my perspective, what I believe is going on, and I will try to back that up with research. If you have questions why I'm going on, please feel free to ask. So, depression. What is it? What you're going to see in depression is difficulty concentrating. You're going to have difficulty remembering details and difficulty making decisions. Now, I want to put this in context for you. This is not just, oh man, I forgot somebody's name. I've met some people here today and I forgot your names already, I'm sorry. Does that mean I'm depressed? Well, actually I am a little bit, but that's not what's doing it. I just have a bad memory. So So not remembering somebody's name, no, that doesn't quite qualify. But not remembering that what you do every day, you get out of bed, you brush your teeth, you find that your life's habits, when you wake up, you go to the bathroom, you brush your teeth, you do these certain things, all of a sudden those things start falling apart. You can't remember what you do next. And it's like, okay, I think I brush my teeth. Yeah, I brush my teeth now. And then you go back and you brush your teeth, or they're out of order. That's what I'm talking about, difficulty remembering. Difficulty making decisions. This is important. This is not about, do I want McDonald's tonight or Hardee's? That is not the decision we're talking about here. We're talking about decisions about, do I want to go to church? Do I want to socialize? Do I want to, get in my car, or do I want to just turn on TV? Those decisions, and when they say difficulty, that is the key word. Those decisions become painful to actually make. It is difficult. When they say difficult, that's the medical euphemism by when the surgeon says, oh, by the way, the surgery is going to be uncomfortable. And you're like, what? No, this is going to be painful. When they say difficulty making decisions, it is painful. It is a painful process, and it's difficult to really understand the mind of a depressed person until you've been depressed, until you've been touched by it. But when the last piece I need to add to these three elements of concentration and decision making and remembering is that in a relationship, this messes with people. Now think of your significant other. If you're depressed and your significant other is not, or vice versa, however you want to do that, and one of you has problems remembering things, it invariably turns into the conversation, well, I called you at work and I asked you to pick up a gallon of milk and you forgot. Literally, I called you 10 minutes ago and you forgot. And it becomes this anger kind of thing, and the non-depressed person is feeling like they've been abandoned. Like, how could you forget? It was 10 minutes ago and you talked to me, and how could you forget this? How could you forget me? And it becomes, for the person who's not depressed, it becomes a little bit about them, because it's like, you're forgetting me in this. So that's important to remember, how depression doesn't just affect the one person, it affects the whole family, it affects loved ones and friends and co-workers as well. Sleepy. Fatigue and decreased energy. Again, the verbiage sounds pretty familiar, it's self-explanatory. You're going to be tired all the time. Some people that are depressed are on the opposite end of the spectrum, and when we talk about adolescents being depressed, all bets are off. Okay, so everything I'm describing here doesn't necessarily work for kids, especially anybody under the age of about 20 doesn't work. As a therapist, and especially somebody who specializes with kids, I'm extremely reluctant to diagnose a child because you can't tease out, is this normal adolescent crazy, or is this true thought disorder, depression, that kind of thing. So those are important. But for adults in depression, you're going to see a lot of this kind of behavior, a lot of, well, I slept hours last night, but I'm still tired, I just can't wake up. And this is more than just a bad sleep schedule. This is an ongoing thing. Waking up throughout the night, on and off, can't go back to sleep. Then insomnia hits, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. Feelings of guilt and shame and hopelessness. Guilt, shame, and hopelessness. I have a friend. His father committed suicide when he was 8. He's now 23 years old. He's extremely bright, exceptionally bright. He specializes in encryption. That's his specialty. He wants to get into the NSA and security. But he is so guilt-ridden, and that won't prevent him from getting security clearance and all that other stuff. But he's so guilt-ridden. The other day, we were standing outside, and we were talking about his job, and it was just this gorgeous day, and not quite as beautiful as today is. It actually smells like spring down here, by the way. Claret still smells kind of like that, has a winter smell to it. So I literally just walked outside and was like, this is great, I love this place. So we were outside, and it was this sunny day, and I go, isn't this a great day? And he goes, The first thing he said was, "Oh yeah, yeah." And then he looks around and I could just see. And I go, what's wrong with the day? And he goes, "It's sunny out." "Oh yeah, it's beautiful." Well, think about all those people that have to drive. I think they have to drive to Green Bay, and they'd be driving into the sun, and the sun would hurt their eyes, and he was feeling guilty about that. And I was like, "Rich, my man, come here." Rich is Catholic, so he's got a whole bunch of works righteousness thing. I think he has to say like 20 Hail Marys, and then he'll feel better or something like that. I always give him a hard time about that, and just say, you should come over here. It's a lot easier. We take a dim view of the whole works righteousness thing, but we still do it. But we try not to. He feels guilty all the time. That is just how he views the world. And his worldview is that if you say hi to him, and he will think about how he's going to respond to you. Should I say hi? Should I say hello? And that will go in his head. And even after he greets you and you go your separate ways, he'll go back, "Oh, they said hi and I said hello. I should have said something different. I should have said, how are you doing?" And that he plays that out in his head. And that's part of depression. That's part of that guilt. It can be guilt over everything or nothing at all, but it will be there, and it doesn't go away. Hopelessness. This picture in the corner, it's hard to find a picture that doesn't look like that. That's not hopeless. The hopelessness does play itself out. Keep in mind that each one of these elements plays itself out in a relationship. It's important to remember that. So if you have somebody who's feeling guilty all the time, and you're their spouse or significant other, and you say, "Hey, let's go do this," and they say, "Well, I really need to do this," and then they begin to feel guilty. That guilt builds up, turns into resentment, and guess what? It turns into an argument because the guilt is there. And the person who feels guilty can't really speak to their guilt because they feel guilty about it. And the hopelessness is that sense of it's not going to get better. It's simply not going to get better. Insomnia. Okay, now I want to tell you something about sleep. If any of you, right now I don't have a practice open right now. I'm still kind of getting on my feet emotionally from the loss of my wife. So I closed up our practice. We have a private practice together with Claire. And so maybe in a few years I'll be on my feet and be able to do this kind of work again. But sleep is hugely important. In private practice, is there a question here? Oh, okay. In private practice, after I see you for the first time, I will ask you about your sleep patterns. And the very first question I will ask you when you walk in the door is, "How have you been sleeping?" It's the very first question. Well, I'm like, "How you doing?" But that's a greeting. But it's really, "How have you been sleeping?" And I can tell you within, 5 words out of their mouth how that session is going to go, based on what they're talking about, their sleep cycle. Other cool thing about sleep, if you think this is kind of cool, it's a little twisted. Nazi Germany, back in the 40s, the Germans wanted to get information out of various countries, soldiers of countries they had invaded, and they wanted an efficient way of doing this, and they kept on killing their captives, and that was like not working for them. So they had to come up with other methods to get this information from them. And what they found out was 72 hours to 96 hours of no sleep, you will tell them everything. And they don't care how hardened of a warrior you are. 96 hours no sleep, there are no secrets. You will tell them everything. That's how powerful sleep is. Sleep does a whole litany of things that science is just beginning to understand right now. One of the core things that scientists are now beginning to agree on that sleep does is that while you sleep, right now you're watching me, you're seeing some of this stuff up here, you see the lights, you feel the ambient temperature, you hear little subtle things, you see a raindrop. 90% of the information you see actually is in your head, and it stays in there. When you sleep, your brain goes through and goes, not important, not important, not important, not important. And it throws out all the little raindrops, or the fact that those lights are up there but they're turned off. Little things that you notice but really aren't part of your consciousness. Your brain goes through and tosses those out while you sleep. If you don't get to sleep, your brain doesn't get to clean house, and that jams everything up. And you will tell me where the Nazi gold is buried in 96 hours. Now, with that in mind, at 5 days of no sleep, you will begin to hear voices. You will begin to see things that aren't there. You will begin to have delusions of grandeur about yourself, who's after you, who's not after you, why. You will have whole stories of psychosis. It's a psychotic break. At 11 days of no sleep, you begin to enter a realm of fatality. You could die at any moment. Nobody has ever gone beyond 31 days without sleep. They die. So without sleep, you will die. So that's how important sleep is. And that's how easily it can mess with you. So if you ever just want to know somebody's secrets, just keep them up for a couple, 3 days, and voila, you will know everything there is to know about them, and then some. Irritability. Yeah, I know it's hard to believe that depression causes irritability, but it is true. Irritability. Think about this in a relationship. If you're the depressed person, you're the one looking like that. If you're the loving spouse of that person, you feel really bad. You begin to feel like you can't keep up, you can't do enough good things. Somehow you failed this person that you love. You throw a healthy dose of Christian love on there. I should be a better husband, I should be a better wife, and if I were, they wouldn't behave this way, they would love me more, we'd be happier. All those shoulds. Remember the guy over here? If you're thinking a lot of shoulds, I need to scooch this way right about now. You need to come over onto this side. And if you're thinking, hey, it's no big thing, you need to come over here a little bit. You need to scooch over to the angry guy a little bit. It plays itself out and it destroys relationships. The irritability and depression. Don't care. Apathy. It kind of follows suit with some of them that I've mentioned above over there. But apathy does set in, and that too plays itself out in relationships. And that apathy can be so profound that the very people that you thought you would love for your whole life, you don't care anymore. You don't even know where those feelings are gone to, they're just gone. And children, in particular, are particularly messed with on this one. If mom or dad is in a depressive bout, and the child comes home and they're like, look at my grade, I got an A on this test, daddy or mommy. And they're in the middle of this huge depressive funk. And the child comes running up to them all excited, and the parent just can't muster enough energy to care. That child knows that, they feel that. And they're like, oh, maybe if I were better, I'll try to get better grades next time, I'll try to get more A's, maybe that will make you happy. All of those things will play themselves out in the family. So you have to be careful around that. And as the spouse, if you're not the depressed person, but you're the person who loves the depressed person, as the spouse of them, that understanding is really, really critical. That understanding that depression is going to play itself out like this in your family. So that's critical, because then you can intervene with the child. Mommy or daddy isn't feeling well today, why don't you show me your grades? And then you can kind of get the depressed person ready and say, okay, now little Johnny's going to come to you in a little while and talk about their grades. I need you to do this. Big eyes, happy face, and smiling. This is what I need you to do. And you're kind of, some of you are like over there going, kind of smiling. No. For a depressed person, you need to show them, because they have forgotten. They have forgotten how to be happy and what that feels like physically. They have forgotten. So you need to go, big eyes, smile. Okay, now do it, you smile. Stop it, leave me alone. No, come on. And you encourage them, and you kind of almost force them a little bit. But you push that a little bit. Obviously you don't push it too far, but you try to push it a little bit to get them on board. It's important to do that. Loss of interest, and eating or not eating, overeating or undereating. Loss of interest in everything, including sex. Depressed people, their libido just kind of leaves. We're done, and they're done. Sexually, within that relationship, you can watch the relationship dissolve because of that type of thing. You combine the apathy with no intimate contact like that, and now you've basically shut down verbal communication, and you've shut down any sense of physical intimacy. You're killing that. You're killing, the relationship gets killed in that process, not you're killing that, because remember, depressed people take this stuff internally and internalize it, so I have to be very careful how I phrase that. But the depressed person can't think about that stuff. It's very painful. It's a very painful process for them to go through. Eating, overeating, or undereating, it's kind of a dichotomy. It's very rare that you'll have a physically fit depressed person. They kind of go to one end or the other. Pain that doesn't go away. It just, no matter what you throw at it, as far as medications and treatment, it just doesn't go away. And again, when somebody's in pain and you approach them, if I had a broken leg, a freshly broken leg, and you come up and go, hey, you want to dance? No, I don't want to dance. I've got a broken leg and it hurts a lot, you know. And you have, yeah, you hear, you know, hey, you want to dance? You could say, no, I'm Lutheran, I don't dance. But pain will automatically kind of shape a person's response to things. So if you're in a lot of pain, it's understandable. I mean, if you just went through surgery, families understand, oh, that person's in a lot of pain, I'm not going to mess with them too much. They're given a little more latitude. But with depression, you can't see the light ramp. You can't see the crutches. And so you forget. It's like, oh, come on. Well, I hurt, my back hurts, you know, or my shoulders hurt, my body hurts. Oh, you know, if you just get outside and you begin to make excuses for them to come out, those excuses feel like more shoulds, and it becomes more weight on them, and it's harder and harder to move in the world for a depressed person, the more shoulds they hear. I really liked this image of the two apples, one happy and then a little post-it in between them with a happy face, and the real apple behind it with a sad face. This image depicts a sense of sad or anxious or just empty feelings, but they put on a good face. And I'll talk a little bit more about the good face in a little bit, but the long and short of it is that's what depressed people do. They will try to put on a good face for you. There are some people that are depressed. Like I said, right now, am I depressed at this very moment? No, but when I think about the loss of my wife, yeah, I get very sad. You know, when I go home at night, and sometimes I'll go in, and I'll go, hey, Lori, and I'll be like, oh, that's right, I hate it when I do that. You know, because it just resonates. And I don't like that, and it makes me feel really sad. So am I depressed then? Yes, but if somebody were to come to the door and go, hey, Dean, I need to get into the AC, I'd be like, oh, okay, I'll be right there. And they wouldn't know. Some of that's German Lutheran, some of that's just this. Depressed people will put on a happy face. They'll put on that front to keep people away from how painful life can be at times. Suicidal thoughts. I'm going to talk a lot more about those in a little bit, but know that they're there. But I want to put them in context for you, okay? Depressed people do have thoughts about death, okay? But now, think of it this way. Now, let's say I am the happiest Christian ever. I don't know what that looks like, but let's just say that, right? And not only am I the happiest Christian ever, but I'm having a super great day. So now I'm the happiest Christian ever with a super great day on top of it. If I have any mind of the Lord at all, okay, happiest Christian ever, super great day, or heaven. Where do I want to be? I want to be in heaven. So even the happiest of Christians is going to be thinking, you know what, heaven's my home. That's where I want to go. Even though this is like the coolest thing ever, thank you, Lord, it would be really cool to be closer to you. So is that suicidal ideation? Is that thoughts of death? Well, thoughts of death, it's a little loose, it's a little stretch. But, I mean, if we're serious about it, the only way you get into heaven is you gotta die. That's it. That's kind of the key. So that's part of our thinking as well when we're not depressed. So do depressed people think about it? Sure. I'll get to that more later. By the numbers. By the end of this presentation, a person will have died. They'll have committed suicide. And this happens every day. It's the third leading cause of deaths in ages 10 to 24. That age range is very interesting, 10 to 24. adolescence starts at the ages of 13 and ends at the age of about 25, 26. I know people want to think that it ends when they get out of high school, but it really doesn't. The brain doesn't really get into full function and full gear till about 25 or 26 years old. Sorry for those of you who are younger than that, but you're still got some years to go yet before you're out of adolescence. 1 in 7 students consider suicide, and 1 in 14 attempt it. And there's significant differences in gender and suicide rates. Women tend to attempt more, and I'm going to use a really kind of bizarre word. Men tend to be more successful in their attempts. Men use methods of suicide that are much more lethal than women do. Women more often than not choose methods of overdosing and asphyxiation, whereas men choose a firearm or hanging, and those are much, much more lethal than the overdosing aspect of it. And 90% of the people, and this is a very, very loose statistic, 90% of the people who die by suicide have a diagnosable and or treatable mental health issue. I think that's much, much higher than 90%. Why are we depressed? Well, according to secular science, the research says we have some things in our past that make us depressed. We survived abuse, whether that be verbal or physical, emotional, sexual. We have survived abuse. And out of that surviving, we become depressed because we haven't resolved issues there. Medications. There are certain medications on the market. Matter of fact, there's a medication right now that's on the market for acne, that when you take it, it causes depression. Certain forms of birth control cause depression. Monsanto right now is being sued for a product they use called Roundup that's used in pretty much anything you get through the window at any fast food restaurant. Has probably been originally sprayed with Roundup. You know, any crop that they're selling through that second window that you reach through and get food. That's been sprayed with Roundup. So if you've ever eaten at a fast food place through a drive-through, you've probably had some kind of Roundup tainted product. Well, there's research right now that's suggesting that Roundup is having a depressive effect. Of course, the folks at Monsanto who made $1 billion last year on Roundup, probably more than $1 billion, are saying, nope, that's not the case at all. So the jury's out there, but I will tell you this, that there are a lot of products out there, whether it's Roundup or not, there are a lot of products out there that we really don't understand how they work, and we don't understand what they do. Just a little sidebar, I was running a mental health clinic located about a half mile away from a shipbuilding yard, and the shipbuilding yard built huge ships. I mean, these things were 400 or 500 feet long. That Orange Ferry, that goes Staten Island Ferry, they built that there. The littoral systems, those are those huge defense ships that you can go in shallow water. By shallow water, it's like 10, 15 feet. But they're huge ships, and they build them there. We would get inundated with these welders that would come there and like, what is going on? Why are we getting all these welders all of a sudden? And be like, oh, well, they're with Marinette Marine, and I'm really depressed, you know. Like, what? You know? And we get like 3 or 4 of them a week, and I'm watching the numbers because I'm the clinic manager and I'm kind of watching the diagnosis. And so I said, okay, that's it. We got to figure out what's going on at Marinette Marine because somehow something's happening with these guys. Well, what we found out, and it took about 2 months, and I had to work with Marinette Marine and get a security clearance and all this other stuff. It was kind of strange. What was happening is they're welding, right? And they're welding really, really crazy metals. We call it steel, but the mixtures and stuff like that, it's a special steel that can stop bullets and all this happy stuff. Anyways, they're welding this stuff, and when you weld, it turns the metal to a gas. You know, part of that goes off in gas. Well, they're breathing it in. So they're getting literally metal poisoning, and it caused depression. And as soon as we figured that out, they said, oh, yeah, that's right, we changed out this old ventilation system we had that we didn't think was working really well, and we got this new and improved one, which obviously wasn't improved enough because the guys were getting sick. Once they changed that out, the guys were okay. We stopped getting these guys coming in with depression. So There are so many things in our environment that can cause depression. It's hard to nail them down, but just be aware that there are lots of them out there. Conflict. Ongoing conflict. And I'm not talking about war zone conflict here. I'm talking about conflict in your work environments. I'm talking about conflict in your families. Any place where you put two people together and they just disagree and you have to live in that world. Okay? That's conflict. And that stress can be palpable, and over time, it does cause depression. It just does. If you take an animal, take any animal you want, and put it in a small confine. If it's used to running on, let's say, 100 acres, and you reduce its size of its run area to, say, less than an acre, it's going to get stressed. That's conflict in that animal's life. The animal, not to be too anthropomorphistic, will become depressed. Death or loss. That's a pretty obvious one. You lose a loved one. And it doesn't always have to be death. I mean, they could move away, there's a divorce. Anything that separates people that love one another, even if it's a happy thing, can cause depression. Genetics. There is no one gene that says, oh, you got this gene, you got depression. What they're thinking right now is there's a series of genes that work together, and when all of those genes, wherever they are, turn on, and you have an environmental stimulus. You work in a tough place, you're exposed to loss, whatever it is, you'll get depression. So you're predisposed, you're genetically predisposed. That would be the technical terminology, but they think there's a genetic link there. Major life events, moving, new jobs, death, loss of a loved one, divorce, graduation of children, entering the empty nest syndrome. All of those events can trigger depression. And you think, well, wait a minute, you know, empty nest syndrome, yeah, the kids are gone, we can kind of do our own thing. Well, yeah, but all those roles that defined you as a mom or a dad are now gone with the kid. And you're like, okay, honey, what are we going to do now? My wife, before she died, she said, we had talked about this, and at one point she says, you know, she had defined herself as a mom. She was a stay-at-home mom. She worked part-time, which she took no small amount of glee in reminding me of that every once in a while. You know, honey, I only work part-time. Okay, I'm not bitter. Okay, just not bitter. I'm dealing with it. Anyways, she said, in a way, she was kind of grateful. We were talking about things that she was grateful about, that she was going to die, and obviously heaven was at the top of her list. But one of the things was she didn't have to redefine herself, because she was a mom. That was her role, that was her deal, and she loved being a mom. And she said, you know, with the cancer, she goes, I don't have to really redefine myself. I don't have to figure out who I'm going to be next. She goes, you do. I don't. So we had lots of conversations around that. Now, is it worth dying for? No, I would say no, but that's my vote. But I mean, if you're looking for the impact of that redefinition of self, that's a major life event when you begin to redefine who you are as you relate to the people around you. This is more of let's see, major events and other personal problems. It's very difficult to read. Personal problems would be anything that range from self-doubt, you're not getting the job you want, the things that you believe that somehow, entitled is the wrong word, but that you've worked hard to achieve and somehow you're not getting them, you're being blocked in those pursuits. Those can all cause depression. Serious illnesses, that's kind of a no-brainer. And it plays itself out in the family as well. And obviously drug and alcohol dependency issues and or abuse. Just so people know, alcohol is a major depressant. As a matter of fact, lots of people who are depressed use alcohol to mask their depression. It's cheaper than going to a doctor. You don't have to make an appointment. There's a whole bunch of things. You don't have to deal with a whole bunch of things that you have to deal with, going to get the right medications. Alcohol does the trick. Then whatever other drugs, street drugs and stuff like that, each of them comes with their own kettle of fish if they're used, and almost all of them cause depression at some point in the lifespan of their use. Matter of fact, I can't think of any street drug that doesn't have a depressive side effect. No. Some people say that marijuana doesn't have a depressive side effect. It doesn't, I would say, it doesn't depress in the way that you're thinking, oh, I'm really, really sad, but it depresses in a sense of making them very lethargic. So, what do you want to do today? Nothing, I'm just going to sit here. You know, they're not, it's not an aggressive depression, it's just kind of this blunted, I don't want to do anything kind of a thing. And then last but not least, sleep disturbances. If you can't get sleep, we're back to that whole sleep thing. It's crazy critical, gotta have it. Brain scans and depression. Okay, for a long time, people thought depression was just something that happened in your head, and no pun intended. And then this wonderful technology came around called MRI and PET scans. I love these studies. I absolutely love MRI and PET scan studies because it is one of the only ways you can actually find out what's going on in somebody's head. Now, you can see on the left side, for all of these, except the bottom one on the right is reversed. So depressed brain, and now they're probably asking them a question. So they ask them, you know, what's 2 + 2? And the depressed brain will respond, the lighted areas will respond like that. These are adult brains, by the way. And then the non-depressed brain, you can see, is firing in all spheres. By the way, if you ever hear, oh, there's 90% of your brain that you don't use, no, that's not true. If you ever meet somebody that's not really using 90% of their brain, they're probably unconscious. So you use all of your brain. Your brain fires. The older you get, the more efficiently it fires. The depressed person on the top middle one, you can see is not firing as hotly for the non-depressed, or as for the depressed side. There's not as much energy going in the depressed brain as there is in the non-depressed brain. And then at the bottom, this is another. I think this is a functional MRI with enhanced image, and it shows the non-depressed brain on this side and the depressed brain on this side, and you can clearly tell that there's a huge difference between how the brain reacts when it's depressed. It just behaves differently. Now, brain scans. 2001, Greensboro. This guy loves doing MRIs, right? Don't ask me why, but this is his thing. I mean, everybody's got their hobbies. His is MRIs, and he's a research scientist. And so what he does is he puts together this study. He takes about, I don't know, a couple thousand people, and he divides them up into age groups, starting from 3 to 7, 8 to 9, or 8 to 10, 11 to, and it keeps on going all the way up to age 45. And he takes them all in their groups. There's, 20, 30, 50, 60, 80, whatever in each group. And what he does is he puts their head in the MRI donut, and he asks them a series of questions. And he watches, okay, what's going to happen? Because really, when they find out these drugs that work, that's really what they're doing. They're saying, your older brothers, when you were kids, they did this to you. Come here once, taste this. That's what a scientist is doing when they want to find out if a drug has the desired effect. Here, take this once, and then they sit and watch. Okay, so that's what this scientist is doing. He has people put their head in the donut, he asks some questions. The one question in which he could look at the image, and it was a video image, and he could tell you how old, 100% of the time accurate, he could tell you how old you were. The one question that worked every single time was, is it a good idea to drink Drano? Really? Drano? What is that? Okay, now adults, you're like, oh, that's kind of funny. Little children, okay, now your children might not know what Drano is, the little ones now, because it's not a common household product, but back then it was. And what they found was kids, when they would start thinking, Drano, what is Drano? And they would have to process, how do I know what Drano is? And then they would kind of go back. Okay, I remember going under the kitchen cupboard, and there was a container there, and when I touched it, it had this ugly kind of skull and bones on it. My mom yelled at me, and I didn't like that. And when my mom yelled at me, I cried, no, it's not a good idea to drink Drano, you know, and they come to that conclusion. Adults, we go, Drano, poison, ugh, you know, and we're done. And the reason why we do that is because our brains fire efficiently. They go across the whole brain instantaneously, and they gather all the information you know about Drano instantaneously. That's why humor is such an interesting concept from a psychological perspective, because your brain is firing like the brain on the top right, not depressed. It is firing all over the place at the same time. It's pulling all these different bits of data about the subject matter together instantaneously. God is pretty cool. On the sign of this stuff. Stigma. Gotta talk a little bit about the stigma around mental illness and depression. Great souls suffer in silence. We're German Lutherans. I mean, this is like a mantra to us. I mean, German and Lutheran, you don't get much more stoic than that. I mean, Vulcans would blush with envy. In case any of you are Star Trek fans, okay, not so much. Okay, anyways. We like stoicism. We like John Wayne. We like the action heroes who have 57 bullet holes. And his beautiful woman comes running up and, are you okay? It's nothing, honey. And he walks off into the sunset. We love that stuff. Guess what? If he said, oh, ow, it hurts, don't touch me, we'd be like, oh, wreck the movie. We wouldn't like that. We don't value those people. But really, that message it's loud and clear to depressed folks. They're like, okay, I just gotta suck it up. I just gotta do the right thing and just gotta be tough about this. And then you tack on there a whole bunch of other stuff that we have going on. We hide these things, we're ashamed of them. And then, you know, the whole, oh, we found a depressed person, you know, and, you know, now it becomes public and you're like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. And then last but not least, yes, our Bible does do this. I'm kind of an NIV fan. Not only so, let me read this to you, but let us also glory in our suffering, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, character hope. Hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who's been given to us. A depressed person sees that and says, I deserve to be depressed. I deserve to be sad, and I shouldn't say anything about this. This is that God, the judgmental God. I think the judgmental God is over here. That's where they're hanging out when they hear and see that. Because God doesn't want to break us. That's not his deal. Oh, okay, wait a minute. There are a few, yeah, there are a couple folks that he didn't want to break. Yeah, I'm thinking of Jonah when he tossed him in the stomach of the whale. Yeah, that was all because Jonah didn't want to listen and do the right thing. So yeah, there is that, but usually depression is different than a willful act. It's not as clearly linked, at least so far. I haven't seen it. How long has depression been with us? I'm going to read to you a little bit here out of, it's a quote from King David. And for just a minute, I want you to be a therapist, okay? And this guy named David comes into your office, and he sits down, and he says a prayer. And the prayer that he says, this is the prayer that he's going to say in front of you. He's not saying it to you, because you're a therapist. He's not talking to you. He's talking to God. But this is the prayer he says. Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger, or discipline me with your wrath. Your arrows have pierced me. Your hand has come down on me. Because of your wrath, there is no health in my body. There is no soundness in my bones because of my sin. My guilt has overwhelmed me, like a burden too heavy to bear. My wounds fester and are loathsome because of my sinful folly. I am bowed down and brought very low all day long. I go about mourning. My back is filled with searing pain, and there is no health in my body. I am feeble and utterly crushed. I groan with an anguished heart. Yeah, he's probably depressed. And whatever he got into with the Lord, yeah, he probably has a depression coming. And I'm not saying that people who are depressed have it coming by any stretch, but I'm saying he is that is a manifestation of depression. So you want to know how long it's been with us? I'd say back then, all the way back then, even before then. But to put it in perspective, Robin Williams recently killed himself, struggled with depression for 20, 30 years. Born and raised an only child, obviously a gifted, gifted man, comedic timing, just amazing, absolutely amazing. Hilarious. Use of drugs and alcohol throughout most of his adult life. Had a wonderful wife and kids. Princess Diana, hot. Amazing woman, suffered from anorexia nervosa, an eating disorder, but was depressed. She died in a car accident. Not of her doing, an unknown inmate. The bulk of our inmates in jail today are mentally ill. I think the sheriff of Orange County in California got on one of the talk shows and said, I am actually the custodian of America's largest mental health hospital. And he was, because well over half of the inmates are mentally ill. But because of the mental illness, they get into trouble legally, and the law just kind of trumps that. I can't think of his name right now.
Terry Bradshaw.
Yes, Terry Bradshaw. Okay. He actually does a little circuit on depression. He will give PSAs on depression. He's been depressed for years. Throughout his football career, and then through the bulk of his announcing career, he was depressed. And he said, one day, I don't know, it was one of the guys on a set came up to him and just said, in a way that would be very much locker room conversation, so obviously not repeated in the church, but basically said, you need to go to a doctor and you need to get on antidepressants. And if you don't do this, I'm going to meet you out in the parking lot and beat the daylights out of you. And Bradshaw actually believed him. He thought this guy would do it to him because he had been messing with this guy. And this was like one of the stage guys. This wasn't like a co-star. This was like a light and sound guy that had just padded up to here with Bradshaw's depressive kind of moods and stuff like that. So he went to the doctor, and he said within weeks, he said he felt so much better. And there's a product, it's an SSRI, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but he said it was like night and day once he had these medications on board, and he hit what they call therapeutic levels. Not everybody here has names. Hemingway, who suffered with depression, Monroe. All of these people, I shouldn't say all of them, have mental illnesses. All of them suffer from depression. Most of them have died as either direct result of their own hand, suicide, or because of neglect. They just get involved in so many things, so many crazy things, they end up dying. So depression has a huge, huge impact. Current government numbers on economic loss to depression is almost $1 trillion a year in work loss. Okay, this is important. This is critical that people understand that. Not all depressed people, see that big circle? That circle represents every depressed person on the planet. Not all of them are suicidal. But all suicidal people, even though that statistic said 90%, but all suicidal people are depressed. So you can't mix them back. You can't go back and forth with them. So all depressed people are not necessarily suicidal, but all suicidal people are depressed. And that is important to know. So when you're dealing with somebody with depression, don't hesitate to ask them, have you thought about hurting yourself? Have you thought about killing yourself, taking your own life? Don't be afraid of that question, because they are not. They have actually thought about it. And if they trust you and they're going to be honest with you, they'll tell you, yeah, I've thought about it. Are you willing to do it? Well, then that's a whole other conversation that you would have with them, and we'll kind of get into some of the signs. A suicidal person will, in their talking, in their conversations, if they're being honest with you, they'll talk about a time. I'm going to kill myself in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or on the 25th of May. They will have a date. Okay, because they've thought about this, because literally in their depression, they are an inmate to their own bodies. They just lay there and think this stuff. They just think, this will make the pain go away. It stops being, how can I make this better, to I just need it to go away and I will do anything to make it happen. So they will have a time, they will have a place. They know where they're going to hurt themselves. They know where they're going to be pretty much within a couple hundred feet always. They will have a method. And again, males tend to prefer firearms, females tend to prefer overdoses. And then they will have the materials. They'll begin to collect materials and talk about how they're going to get these materials. The more details they have, the more afraid for them you need to be. So if they say, next week Tuesday at 4:30 in the afternoon after I get home from work, I'm going to go into my house. In my bedroom, in the closet, is a shotgun. The shells are on the other side of the room in a locked cabinet. I have the keys for them. I'm going to go unlock that. I'm going to load the shotgun. I'm going to sit down on the bed, put the gun in my mouth, and pull the trigger. That kind of detail, you say, I need you to stay right here. You pick up your phone, you dial 911. You've now gone beyond your pay grade. Do not try to do anything else with these folks. And when 911 answers, you need to say, hi, my name is, insert your name here. This is where I'm at. I'm speaking to my friend, their name, and they just told me that they're going to kill themselves, and I believe them. I need your help. They will send police officers right away. Now, this is where it gets hairy, because when the police officers get there, your friend is like, I don't know what you're talking about. You know, all of a sudden, you're like, oh, they said it to me, and the cop's looking at you like, really? Is that really? You know, and now you're stuck in the middle there. But you have to do this. You have to show your friend you love them enough that you're going to put that on the line. At first, they're going to be really angry at you for the first couple of weeks, but after they get some help and treatment gets on board and things level off, they will thank you, and they will apologize profusely, or they should. So, their actions. What you will see from a suicidal person is they're not talking, but you get to watch them move around in their house. You will see a preoccupation with death. And what will that look like? Their search engine is covered with, you know, how to die, these people died, you know, all these crazy kinds of websites. They'll talk about death, they'll watch shows about cemeteries, and anything having to do with death, any part of death, they will be fascinated by. Visiting and calling people to say goodbye. This is a rough one. I've run a number of groups for the victims or survivors of suicide. This one, if there's one thing that messes with people the most, it's visiting or calling people to say goodbye. Because this is what the suicidal person does. They don't understand what they're doing. They really don't, and I don't think they mean it this way. But what happens is they call you up and they talk about, hey, remember when we were kids and we did this? And it's just kind of out of the blue. You don't expect the call or anything like that. It's like, oh yeah, that was so funny. And you laugh about it for a little while. And it's like, and part of you is thinking, man, haven't heard from you in a while, but this is really cool. You seem really upbeat. And then they say, well, yeah, it was kind of fun. We'll talk to you later. Goodbye. And there's a pause. There's just a hint there, but you're still happy about the conversation, right? But there's a piece of you that goes, it doesn't quite fit. You will feel it later, and it will be amplified if they're successful in their suicide. You'll go, that's why they called me. That's why I thought, I knew there was something wrong. Invariably, I deal with that in groups. I dealt with that in groups all the time. And those people, by the way, were really, really angry at the suicide person. And they have every right to be angry. Because what that suicide person had done was basically put it on them. And basically, they walk around now going, why didn't I say something? And that stays with them. That's just a profound hit. Making arrangements and settling one's own affairs. Folks who are elderly and folks who are about to die. My wife and I went through this before she died. We had to go around and figure out what was what, and did we do a real good job? I don't think we did a great job, but we did the best we could, given where we both were emotionally. But you kind of arrange things. You get things in order. That's part of the process, and people will do that. Giving things away. all of a sudden making sudden happier or calmer. Okay, the giving things away is pretty obvious. I mean, you're gonna walk in the house, hey, take my stove. What? I don't want your stove. No, really, you should take that. And it will be odd things. Some of it will be really appropriate, like, oh, I always really loved that, whatever it was. Oh, you should have that. And you're like, oh, thanks. But they'll give things away. The sudden happier and calmer, that's an important one. And you'll notice it. If you've been talking to them on and off, they're depressed, and you call them up and you're like, oh, here we go again. We're going to be talking about the same old stuff, and they're depressed, and it really depresses me to talk to them, but I really want to talk to them because I care about them. You call them up and they're like, hey, how's it going? You're like, whoa, who's this? Where did this come from? And you'll be surprised by their energy. Or they'll be like, no, everything's good. Be very aware. Say, okay, no, we're going to talk. I'm coming over to your house in a little bit. Or you need to come over here and we need to talk. I need to see you face to face. Because that's what they'll do. And then the first 2 to 6 weeks on a new antidepressant. That's really important. Antidepressants do not cause suicide. SSRIs do not cause suicide. What happens is the person is really crazy depressed, can't get off the couch. Somehow they get a hold of some SSRIs, some antidepressants. They take a couple. All of a sudden they start coming out of that depressive funk. So they're starting to move up and getting a little more energy. Well, the first thing they want to do is kill themselves because that's how low they are. So that 2 to 6 weeks when they're coming out of that depressive funk, that bottom of where they were, you really need to have eyes on them. The clinic that I ran, we had daily contact. If you got a new antidepressant, it's like, okay, if you're getting a new antidepressant from us, we're going to call you every day. And we want to hear your voice and not just, hi, it's me, click. No. We're going to have a conversation. 15-minute conversation. Know that it's coming. This is what time it is. If you're not there, we're sending the police. So people were like, okay. But we didn't have the problem of suicide. We had some close calls, but we never had a successful one after we did that. Let's see. What should you do if someone is suicidal? We're rational creatures. We love rational thought. So what we're going to usually present with is you have so much to live for, you have so many gifts, what will your family think about this, what will the church think about this? Those are all rational thoughts. Suicidal people, they're not rational. That's not who they are. That kind of comment will shut them down. They won't talk to you, they'll say, whatever, I'm leaving. That'll make them angry because it just makes them more depressed. Instead, show your concern and just say, things have got to be really hard. I can't imagine what it's like to be in your shoes. You just must be so depressed. Even if you just echo back what they say to you verbatim, if they say, I'm just so depressed, and literally you'll be amazed. When people want to talk, it sounds really corny and it sounds like something you've heard on TV, but it works. If you say to somebody, when they say, I'm just so depressed, if you say the words, and I encourage you to say it sounds like you're really depressed, they will talk more. That's why therapists do that, not just to be annoying. They do that because it helps people to talk more. And they do. People do respond to that. Because you're connected to them. For the first time in a long time, they feel heard. And they want to tell you their story. I don't always basically do echolalia, but I echo back to people what they say to me, and they talk more. Let's see. And then we go back to that plan. The more detailed the plan, the more you need to be concerned. Sit right there with them. Don't let them get up. If they say, oh, I'll be right back. No, I'm coming with you. I'm coming with you. You're not going to be right back. I don't trust you right now. You talk about hurting yourself. I'm coming with you. So, what can we do? Genesis, and I'm sorry, basically I could stop right here and just say what Pastor said and leave. God said, okay, He creates Earth, right? He creates this amazing place. And every time He creates something else, and it's good, right? Every time, and it's amazing. You know it's amazing. And makes Adam. And He looks at Adam and says, ooh, it's not good for you to be alone. So first critique offered in the Bible. It's not good for man to be alone. And you want to know something? Isolation can destroy a human being. You isolate somebody, destroy them. I went into we had an isolation chamber at University of Scout in my graduate program. And because I was all of, 26 years old, yeah, I'm gonna go in there, yeah, I read all that stuff, I'm all big and bad, I can handle this. What an isolation chamber is an oversized coffin. It's huge, it's like this big. It looks like a giant tanning bed, that's probably the best way to describe it. And it's filled with a really heavy salt water. So when you lay in it, you're kind of floating. You don't actually touch anything, you're just kind of floating. And the water is body temperature. And then you get in there, and then they close the lid, and it's dark. It's like dark. If you're claustrophobic, don't do it. Okay, well, basically, you're human, don't do it. But don't do it. Okay, so anyways, I do this. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, I can handle this, I got this sequence. And there are certain techniques, mind games you can use to put off people from getting in your head. And we were taught some of these things. And so, yeah, I got all my little mind games all in a row, and I'm ready for this, right? I get in there, and I honestly thought I was in there for like 3 or 4 hours. Half an hour. Half an hour. And it was like 2 weeks before I could stop blubbering like a baby every time the wind blew. It really messed with me. You just lose all sense of where you are, of up and down, gravity's gone, just any kind of touch. It really gets in your head. And there is nothing you can do about it. And I'm telling you, before we got in there, they gave us a whole series of training on how to withstand this, on how to withstand and how to ready for this. And one of the trainings, and they teach this to people who are going to be POWs, or they think they're going to be POWs, is they call it a tap count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you're just using your fingers and you're tapping on a part of your body, right? Because what you're doing is you're affirming yourself. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're affirming rational thought. 4, 3, 2, 1. And you just keep on doing that. You can do it on the table too, but if you can touch yourself. Okay, so I do this. I thought I was in there for hours. Do that. And so I come out and I'm sort of, and this other guy who was going to come in after me, because you got to get in there in swim shorts and stuff like that, he looks at me and he goes, he is messed up. I'm not doing that. I really thought I could handle it. Isolation? No. That dog doesn't hunt. No, not at all. So, now I gotta talk, I want to talk a little bit about, I worked with inmate populations. One of my jobs was to evaluate inmates to find out if they were just faking mental illness to get in by the cute nurses and good food, or if they were really mentally ill. And so my job was to kind of interview them and figure out what was going on in their heads and then place them accordingly. During the process, I ran into a lot of folks that had a syndrome that I didn't know the name of at the time because the name didn't exist. It's called Segregated Housing Unit Syndrome, SHU. And what it is the syndrome with common symptoms, and it happens to almost every inmate that's put in isolation. Isolation is such a has such a powerful effect on humanity that Amnesty International has petitioned the Geneva Convention of War holders, or whoever those folks are, the people who maintain that document, and they've asked them to place onto inhumane treatment isolation, because it destroys your ability to even figure out who you are, and it is so destructive. So when God said it's not good for man to be alone, I think God knew what he was talking about. It's interesting to know that while God was creating the heavens and the earth, I think there are other references in the Bible that talk about how the angels were there watching. So God wasn't alone. God created us to worship him, not to be alone. So even God knows it's not good to be alone. It's probably not good to be alone for him either. I don't know. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to be God's psychotherapist. That would be scary. But I will say that human beings do not do well with isolation. And I do want to also add, if there are people shut-ins in your congregation, reach out to them. You'll be amazed, absolutely amazed, at how quickly they respond to socialization. You want to reach out to them, keep contact with them as much as you can. Now, so God says it's not good for man to be alone. So, okay, this is, but I should bring this up. Brain scans of isolation. On the left side is a normal 3-year-old brain. On the right side is the brain of a 3-year-old child that had been severely neglected. The child was basically sometimes fed, but most of the time the child was literally thrown into a room and left there on the floor from birth on. The child obviously ate enough to survive, but you can tell the difference between the two brains. You don't need to be an X-ray tech to know that that child is severely, severely damaged. As a matter of fact, when they found the child, they thought the child was less than a year old when the social workers found the child. Now, the image on that side is the labs out of University of Wisconsin-Madison, Harry Harlow, 1950s. Did some really interesting research, kind of twisted, and what he decided to do was raise monkeys without any contact, right? And this monkey, what he did is he had a wire cage with a bottle in it, and then right next to it, he had this, he says it looks like a monkey, but you can see what the monkey's laying on. It's a towel with a weird kind of alien head on it. But the monkey would go eat from the wire mesh and then go lay on the towel. The monkeys who were raised in isolation and deprivation like this, none of them socialized well after 6 months, actually after 3 months. They couldn't reintegrate them back into normal monkey troops of 3 months of isolation starting from birth. If they lasted a year in isolation, if the monkeys actually lived through that kind of isolation and they tried to reintegrate them with monkey troops, the troops of socialized normal monkeys would immediately attack that one. As soon as that one was put in there, somehow they knew instantly that was not a good monkey. There was something wrong with it, and they would attack it. Don't know why, don't know what the deal is, but isolated monkeys freaked out the other monkeys. I hope it doesn't work that way with human beings. Okay, so God says, I will make for man a helpmate. Okay, it's not good for man to be alone. So God makes this observation, not good for man to be alone. I think I'm going to go theologically a little sideways on this, so Pastor, you have my permission to come up and say, blasphemer, and then strike me down with whatever Lutheran lightning you got going on there. Okay? Okay, now, God looks at Adam and he says, okay, it's not good for you to be alone. That's what he says. And he does some interesting stuff. He creates Adam, and then he has all the animals walk past Adam, right? And he shows them the garden, and he says, oh, by the way, these 2 trees, don't be hanging out don't go by those trees. Then he brings Eve into the picture. Interesting sequence of events. So maybe he did give Eve the rundown, the training on the garden, where it's like, okay, here are all the animals, Adam already named them, and these trees. Or maybe he left it to Adam to kind of bring Eve up to speed. I don't know how that worked, but it's an the Bible's very clear about that piece. I always go, I wonder how that worked. I wonder who brought Eve up to speed. That's beside the point. Getting back to Eve. Research on Eve. No, nobody found Eve's body, or nothing like that, nothing really cool, but this is what I can tell you about women in general. Well, first I'm going to go back to Eve. Eve's specs, because she was designed to help Adam not be alone. I'm going to make for you a helpmate. Now, we always think that Eve, this euphemistic Eve is there to make me a sandwich. Eve, go make me a sandwich. No, I don't think that was the deal. I don't think that's how that worked at all. I think Eve was designed to actually rescue Adam from isolation. So what does God do? How does God spec her out? I believe, and I have no reason to believe this other than, she was created to look like God. She had to be smoking hot, okay, first thing. So Adam was like, whoa, she's beautiful. Second thing, what we know about women, and research bears this out. Women acquire language earlier than men. Their language skills are much more sophisticated earlier than men. They communicate and they rely on verbal communication much longer and earlier than men. If you take a boy and a girl raised in identical households, and you look at the number of words each of them has, the girl will have more at the same age. This kind of catches up around age 17, 18, 15 to 17, 18. They kind of level off. But early on, girls are way ahead of the game. Way ahead of the game in their ability to socialize, in their ability to engage, in their ability to identify and empathy. They're way ahead of boys in all of those spheres. If I wanted to make somebody that was designed to help somebody else not be alone, what skill sets would I give them? I would give them the skill set to communicate. I would make them to look appealing. I would teach them how to be empathetic. I would teach them how to understand. Those are the skill sets I would want them to have, because the person who wants to isolate or is going to be isolating, they're going to need all of those skills to draw them out of that isolation. They're going to need that stuff. So I think Eve was designed for a purpose. And that was, I will make for him a helpmate. I've seen it help meet. I'm still trying to figure that out. There's a whole bunch of definitions of that particular word in the Hebrew and Greek, or Hebrew, and it always says helpmate, but I think it's more, because helpmate doesn't, if God says it's not good for man to be alone, he makes this critique, and then says I want to make for him a helper that's kind of like his subordinate. Does it address that issue? Yeah, I suppose, kind of, but not directly. I don't think there's enough linkage there, to my mind. I think the linkage really comes in Eve's ability to socialize and engage Adam and bring him out of that isolation, and bring him out, to socialize more. Okay, benefits of people. If you haven't figured this out already, there are a lot of benefits to knowing people. I'm going to get back to the Adam and Eve thing in a minute. But what research has found is that when people engage other people, if I'm isolating and all of a sudden you reach out to me and you're engaging me and I'm happy, I'm more creative than I was before the engagement. You tend to see less cognitive decline, me shutting down my faculties and just saying, you know what, this is not worth it. You see less incidents of mental illness and depression. You see people who score higher on intelligence tests, and in general, they tend to be more likable. Their families tend to be their families tend to be more integrated into their communities, and they tend to be better off. That's the benefit of people. So obviously this is all research-based. This is not just me guessing at things. This is all research-based. God knew what it's all about. God knew the effects of isolation and how important it was to have somebody there for them. Okay, okay. Now, remember the Sabbath. Okay, I need to, I know I'm messing with the camera, but I need a laser pointer here. Here we go. Now, Pastor, I'm sorry about what I'm about to say, but there's two people in the world that are lied to the most: pastors and therapists. It was an old therapist joke that I was told when I was in grad school. It's since been amended to the people who are lied to the least: bartenders and Google searches. Okay, these are Google searches. Now if you look, they have this thing called total misery index, right? And misery, they define misery as any word that is negative, is miserable, is about hurt or pain or hate or some kind of negative emotion. Total misery index. Now, the searches on Google on pain, you can see it here: anxiety, stress, depression, and fatigue. You can see those all up here. Pain, if you notice, on Monday, this is the searches. Tuesday, it comes to about Friday, you see a drop. Saturday, drop, and then Sunday it starts going back up. Searches on pain. Anxiety, look at the same thing. Saturday, it's down. Stress, you see it raising on Monday, and the work day. Are you getting this? Depression, oh, look at there. Saturday down. Okay, fatigue, here we go. Boom. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. I cannot stress enough Rest, people. You know, I'm sitting up here with 2 pieces of electronics that are wired in. I got a cell phone that I'm giving a presentation off from a Google document that I made over in Eau Claire, and I downloaded it here, and blah, 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 right? We are so interconnected, and while I'm talking to you up here, my daughter has texted me twice. Okay. No, I have not responded to it. Okay. These things do not help us. We need to hang up sometimes. We need to take that break. We need to take a look and say, you know what? These searches tell us everything right here. Saturday. And I don't think people are trying to keep the Sabbath day holy on Saturday. I think it's the day they're out of work. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to go home. What did God do on the 7th day? He rested. If it's good enough for him, I think enough to fit into my schedule. I can't encourage you enough. Rest. Find rest. Sleep during my presentation. It's all good. Anytime you can, do that. Rest. Rest is good. Get away, unplug. As a society, we do not value this. As a matter of fact, we see rest as weakness. I remember when I worked for the county, we got cell phones, and there was a running dialogue. Oh, you're not taking your cell phone with you on vacation? No. Really? My boss said that. Really? Yeah, really. I'm not taking it with me. Well, we might need to get a hold of you, so I might send law enforcement out by you. And see, that was the bad part about my job, is they could use cops to come and get me. And my kids, my kids and my wife just got used to it after a while, but they would come, if there was something going on and they wanted me, they would send a cop to my house and pick me up. And the neighbors just thought it was a hoot. They would tell other neighbors who didn't know, oh yeah, that's Dean, you know, he's in trouble with law enforcement all the time. Thanks a lot. Okay, that's bad, I shouldn't do that. But anyways, that's what they would do. And so there was no hanging up. I couldn't get away. But I encourage you to get away, to hang up. And don't allow our society to tell you your work is important. I promise you, at the end, whenever the end does come, and it will come, at the end, you will not say, man, I regret not spending more overtime at work. You will not say that. What you will say is, I wish I'd spent more time with my kids. I wish I would have went camping. That's what you will say. This just shows you. I mean, people are naturally doing this. God knew. He put this in us. He knew. And we're just showing you now. This is just numbers at this point. We're showing you got rest. Curses. Curses. This is some really cool stuff. And if I go left on this, Pastor, you're gonna just stand up and just say, okay, at this point, the CLC does not endorse Dean, and we're taking away his mileage to come here.
Angry cat.
Yeah, he said, angry cat. Okay, so if I go south on this, you gotta kind of, but here's my belief, okay? The curse. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Now, usually when we think about the woman's curse, we always think about the birthing thing, right? You guys get to birth the baby. Now, just keep in mind, had I been in the garden, men would be birthing the baby, because I would have gone right for those trees. I know who I am, I know what I'm about, and they're like, oh, yeah, I gotta go check out those trees. So guys have been birthing, and women have been like, yeah. So thank you, Eve, if I'm going to thank her for anything. We don't have to birth babies. But here is the catcher. What I see in therapy all the time. And your desire will be for your husband, he will rule over you. There's a bunch of really interesting research on this. Oh, by the way, if there's any feminists in here, email the pastor. He'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
I need rest.
Pastor's like, I think he's been drinking. Okay. There's this phenomenon called boy crazy. Girls go through it. Boys don't have a similar counterpart to this. We don't get girl crazy. Yeah, we think about sex, but it's not the same as boy crazy. Boy crazy is a whole different phenomenon. Girls are very, very interested in being where the boys are. It's not a sexual thing. They don't always want to engage boys sexually during this boy crazy kind of thing, but it's there. I believe, I can't prove this, but, and you will desire your husband. Is that boy crazy? Did God put that curse on girls? You'll want to be by your husband? Now keep in mind, back in the day, this is a whole other presentation, but back in the day, 13, 14, 15 years old, you were all having babies by then. Bar mitzvahs were 13 years old. Bar mitzvah literally means man of the law. And what they would do is they'd have these 13-year-old boys stand up behind one of those things and recite parts of the Torah. The Torah was the law. And the law, if you could recite the law, that meant we could enter into contracts and I could get married. And guess what? All of that pent-up sexual kind of crazy, hey, honey, come here once. That's where that's going. All of that, those relationships are taken care of. The Industrial Revolution, because we wanted our phones and our computers and our really cool laser pointers. Purple, really? My kids got that from me, I think they like it. Anyways, we wanted all of our technology, and that's what the Industrial Revolution did for us. It gave us technology. But it has other implications, and I'll get to that in the man curse. But, boy crazy. Girls, go boy crazy. We see it, there's evidence for it, there's research behind it, this is a phenomenon. Is it well documented? It is documented. Is it as well documented as IQ? No, not so much, but it is there. It's definitely there. It's definitely acknowledged. Women look for affirmation more than men do. And your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Women look for affirmation more than men do. Two guys, you and me, we go out and do something. Hey, throw me the hammer. I throw you the hammer. I barely even look at you. I know you're over there, you want the hammer, I throw it at you, right? You say that, it's your wife. Hey, honey, throw me the hammer. She looks at you, here you go, and she's looking at your face. She's looking, is this okay? Is this what you want? I don't care. Here's the hammer. You know, I'm doing my stuff over here. Guys are wired differently. Is that a bad thing? No, this is part of that whole schema that the Lord put in play to keep us together. But women want affirmation. And I've had women in therapy say to me, I don't know why I want him to be impressed by me. I don't know why I want him to like me. I don't know why I want him to know what I do. And it makes me angry and it makes me crazy and I don't like it. I've had women say that to me. Do all women believe this? No, I haven't talked to all women. Is there research to bear this out? Not a lot. I would like to actually do some research into it. I know that I would be on the talk shows and that I would be the brunt of every feminist on the planet. So, Caveman Does Research would be kind of the title. This bit of research is really interesting. Women, more often than not, prefer male bosses. Okay? And there's a bunch of research in this, and it's just opinion polls. That's all the research is, so it's not like this, you know, wire women up and just ask them a bunch of questions. So it's research, but in most of the research, and there's quite a bit, I mean, the size is well over 10,000 people sampled. Not in one research shop, but in many, over 10,000 women have been asked, male or female boss. All things being equal, women have traditionally said about 80% of the time they say they prefer a male boss. Is this linked to, and he will rule over you? I don't know, but man, it looks like it fits. So I'm a little loose, but it looks like it fits. And then we go back to that affirmation part. Believe it or not, and I know this is probably a shocker to most of you women, research has shown that women value intimate relationships, not necessarily sexual, but intimate, emotionally bonded, close relationships more than men do. I know you probably didn't know that about yourselves, but it's true. That doesn't mean that men can't value those relationships. It means that men don't place as much weight on those relationships as women do. Men, again, they isolate. If all things being equal, if they can sneak off someplace, they're going to isolate. Oh, yeah, I'll see you a little bit. Oh, we got company coming over? Great, honey, I'm going to go way back and I'll be over here. You know, guys will try to get out of that stuff. Now, guys, okay, by the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food. this is really interesting. Okay, guys love solutions. If you talk to a guy, especially if a girl, women like to process. They like to just talk about the issues, right? And they just want to put those issues out there, and they just want to feel validated, like, oh man, that's the worst thing in the world. That's all they really want. Guys will be like, he said what? No, you know what? Next time you talk to him, you need to do blah, blah, blah. And they have a solution for you. Guys want to solve the problem. So, guess what guys did come the Industrial Revolution? The problem was sweating brows. Guys were not into sweating brows. No, that was not okay with sweating brows. But, back in the day, before the Industrial Revolution, a lot of sweating of brows, a lot of growing our own food. When I was growing up, I couldn't think of a family that didn't belong to a farm someplace. My grandparents didn't know anybody who didn't live on a farm. I mean, they knew some of the town grocers and stuff like that, but most of the people they knew lived on farms. 100 years later, after the Industrial Revolution, everything's been automated. The sweat of the brow is gone. We've gotten rid of all of that. But one thing you will notice that we haven't gotten rid of, rates of depression, rates of suicide, homicide, crime rates, all have gone through the roof. Oh, and let's not forget, the exercise industry is a $60 billion a year industry. So there's no sweat of the brow being gone here. We just got rid of the, I'm going to go grow my own food, and we turned it into running around and lifting weights. Now, if you actually think about this, we're just lifting heavy things, and we pay people money to do this. Can I come to your house and lift heavy things? I'll give you $100 a month. Sure, yeah, come over. You go ahead and sit in the backyard and do it. I'm good with that. That's how ridiculous we've become as a people. Because we've been cursed. Sweat of your brow. We got to figure out how to put the sweat of the brow back on the brow, and for us to like it. Somehow we don't like it. I don't like it. I love robots. This is kind of twisted. I love robots. I'm head of the robotic team at Emmanuel. I love automating things. If you came into my house and looked, you would see all sorts of partially built robots laying around the house. No, they're not laying like every place, but there's a room that's full of them. I love these things. I play with them all the time. I'm clearly bucking against the trend, of sweat of my brow. I have a lawnmower that's a robot that would mow my lawn for me if I ever actually got out of the house and put it in place, and it would just do it all by itself. I'm a little too ashamed to go that far, but it's in my garage and I think about it all the time. Sweat of my brow. I'm fighting against my own curse. And what happens when we fight against our own curse? As a society, we can see it. Rates of depression, suicide, crime rates, unhappiness just in general. All of these things come in when we fight against these curses. God designed us to withstand these curses, but we are trying to slip the handcuffs of these curses. Solutions. Now, before I get into a lot of solutions, I want to go back to one of the first slides I started with. How do you see God? Judgmental or happy God? Okay, the happy, everything's good God. If you're judgmental, scooch this way. If you're the happy, I can do anything I want, you need to scooch back a little bit over this way. And the reason why I say that right now is because some of these solutions, if you're depressed yourself or know somebody that is, these solutions are going to sound like shoulds. You should be doing this, you should be doing that. It's going to sound really bad, and it's going to be one more thing I have to do. Forgiveness. My wife and I, one time, went through our caseload that we had a couple hundred clients, and we just did this informally, and obviously we're Christians, okay, so I'm going to put all the bias out there. We obviously have a bias toward certain things. But we went through and we examined each case, and what we said was, we're looking for the cases, how many cases would we not have in our office if they knew how to do this kind of forgiveness? We lost about 90% of our clientele in that count. Forgiveness is incredibly powerful. It's amazingly powerful. And its impact on people is so profound. I can't understate it enough. It sounds like, wow, we should believe in Jesus. It is such a perfect remedy for so many of our ailments, forgiveness. And the forgiveness, the Greek, I believe comes, it's a banking term, don't ask me to pronounce the word. You pastor, you know right off the top of your head, right? The Greek word for forgiveness.
Yeah, there's a few different ones.
The one I'm thinking of is the one to neglect or to let go of.
Right.
Okay, that's consistent, right? Okay, phew, okay, that's... Okay, now the forgiveness means to neglect or to let go of. If you think about being hurt by somebody, being harmed by somebody, and this guy comes in my house and he steals my stuff and he punches me in the face and I'm really sad and angry and I feel violated and I don't like this and I'm really angry at him, I'm rageful at him for doing this to me, for harming me in such a horrible way. When I begin the process of forgiveness and I begin to let go of all that negative energy, I begin to heal. But if I hang on to that negative energy, if I'm like, you know what, I'm making my house a fortress, and you know, the next time I see that guy, I'm going to punch him, and I'm going to do all this evil stuff, and you know, I'm going to get revenge. All of that just contributes to a lot of negative health. It contributes to me not getting back on my feet. It contributes to me being angry, and over time, guess what? It contributes to my depressions. So, forgiveness. There's 3 forms. I know we should all just say, oh, there's only one form. But I believe there's 3 forms. There's God's forgiveness. And that would be the God that's over here, and He does forgive us. He does love us. He wants what's best for us. Then there's others' forgiveness. It's the acceptance. If you've harmed somebody else, and you go to them and you say, you know, I'm really sorry, and they forgive you, you have to accept that. And that can be really, really hard, because as people, we do some pretty awful things to one another sometimes. We don't mean to all the time. Sometimes we even do mean to, but to be able to accept that forgiveness of others. And then to be able to accept your own forgiveness and just say, you know what, I'm a human being, and I screw pretty much everything up. But right about the time I wake up till the time I go to sleep, I'm pretty much messing up pretty much everything I touch. And to be able to forgive yourself. That's huge. Another solution, helping others. Again, this goes to the isolation thing. What was found was that when people that were depressed did, like, I'm going to say community service just for ease of phraseology, but basically just help others. It doesn't have to be a community service. You don't have to go someplace. Help your neighbor. Just help somebody else. They don't even have to know that you did it, but you help others. It goes a long way to helping people that are depressed. Go for a walk. Sweat your brow. 20 minutes a day. You don't have to walk with anybody. You can if you want, but just get out of your house, go for a little walk. It makes a huge difference. The research shows that people who are depressed and other people who manage to get around the house for 20 minutes a day report that the depression is less. It doesn't make it go away. It's not like some kind of magic pill, but they feel less depressed after a 20-minute walk. Surround yourself with positive people, humor, and music. Okay, positive people, you know who they are. They're people that are funny, that are good people, that are kind people. You want to be by those folks. Stay by those folks. Humor. Find things that are funny. And no, this does not mean type in funny into YouTube and watch funny YouTube videos. Although, if you get a chance, Russian dash cams and cows. That is hilarious. And this is, I don't get it with the Russian people. They amaze me. They mostly frighten me, but they are amazing. Okay, so that's kind of funny. So definitely check that out. But surround yourself with humorous people. Find those people, seek them out, bring them into your life. Music. Anything by Katy Perry or on the Pop 40, probably avoid that. It's usually about partying and just nihilistic craziness and how there's no tomorrow, which flies in the face of everything that we believe here. So nothing there, but find music that you respond to. And God, in the Bible, talks about music, having a soothing effect. Find that. There's some amazing artists out there. I found, I'm 51 years old, and no, I don't dance, not because I'm Lutheran, but because I just don't. I'm mostly just a white guy. So that's just a bad combination, and then overweight, it just doesn't work. But the music that I like to listen to is Lindsey Sterling. She's a violinist, and she does a lot of dubstep stuff. So it has a beat to it, very interesting stuff. And you can kind of get into that rhythm of the music, and it does change your disposition. It will. There's tons of research on it. Matter of fact, there's a whole segment of psychology devoted to music therapy. So makes a huge difference. Social media. Facebook, to my mind, is just gossip central. Most of social media is gossip central. They actually have this thing now called selfie stick, and you put a camera on the end of the stick and you go like this and you hold it out so you can take a picture, of yourself with whatever's behind you. Selfie stick. I'm thinking if I had a selfie stick when I was a kid, my brother would have beat me with it. Come here. That's where that would have went. But the selfie sticks are out there. Social media. Research shows that people who watch TV, there's a similar reaction in the brain as to socializing. But there's a bunch of things that are missing in the brain as well. But there's some similar things. So it's like when you watch a sitcom, you're laughing about, that's so funny, that's the best thing in the world. There's still pieces missing in the brain that are not firing that if you experience the same thing in the real world with another person face to face, your brain responds differently. So it's kind of like Cheetos. Yeah, that's what social media is. They're like Cheetos. They taste good. They're kind of filling, but you have to eat like a ton of them. The poofy ones, not the curly ones. The poofy ones. You got to eat like a ton of them to really get filled up. And then they're not good for you at all. I mean, they're really just not good for you. And that's what social media is like. They're just really not good for you. Yeah, you can keep connected with people and friends and loved ones. And I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying don't replace your connections with loved ones with this. Skyping, I'm sorry, it is not the same as holding a grandchild. Here's the grandbaby, they hold up to a camera. Sorry, not the same as you hanging on to it. Just not gonna happen. You cannot replace a hug by going like this, if your camera's right there. Oh, I love you, and they just get to see like a close-up of your ear. No, that's not the same. Trust me, it's not. It doesn't work. So, social media. It doesn't count as human contact, and you have to have human contact. You have to touch people. Touch is hugely important. Touch them. Hold them. Okay? That's important. Medication. Does it help? Absolutely. Medication is amazing. But this is what medication does. SSRIs. Do they know why they work? They have no clue. Nobody knows. They really actually were started off back in the 60s and 70s, SSRIs, as a heart pill. And what they found is as they gave it to people, people were less depressed. So what they found was that SSRIs do is if this is like, really high, super happy, and this down here is really low, very sad, very depressed, what SSRIs do is they only go halfway up and halfway down. So if you had to attend a funeral and you were on SSRIs or serotonin reuptake inhibitor, Prozac. If you were on Prozac, you wouldn't feel as bad as if you were not on SSRIs or on Prozac. So it stops the bottom, but it also stops the top. So it brings you into that middle range. Is that good? Absolutely, because when you're really depressed, you need every kind of thing you can get on your side to get out of that depression. It's a good jump start. I definitely recommend it. Okay, a couple things to know about SSRIs. You cannot overdose. So if somebody says to you, I'm taking all my antidepressants, still call the police, but don't worry that they're not going to die. I know people that have taken over 500 doses of Prozac and lived. And they watched them down with a 12-pack. And they still live. Therapy? Yeah, believe it or not, it does help. And I'm a therapist. It will take longer than 5 sessions, no matter what the insurance company tells you. But yes, it does help. And that's not just for the depressed person. Get their loved ones in there too. Not at the same time. They should kind of get their own therapist because the loved ones have to deal with the depressed ones. Sleep, gotta have it. can't say enough about it. So, I think that about covers everything that I had. I'm a little over. But any questions, comments, rude remarks? Pastor, am I still in the church? another voters meeting, right?
We're gonna have to have another voters meeting.
We're gonna excommunicate you from like, teleconference. Any other questions or anything? Yes.
You talked about verbal abuse as being a cause of depression,
Yes.
and I was wondering if you knew someone who had been through verbal abuse, and you need to treat that person specially in any way, like to avoid triggers that may cause the person to respond irrationally or angrily.
Mhm.
On the other hand, how do you know if maybe, that actually it's not as much of a psychological problem as a spiritual problem? Maybe you're enabling sinful behavior. How do you know really?
Okay. We'll start off with the first question on verbal abuse. Should you treat somebody that's been victimized differently than somebody that's not been victimized? Only in as much as you acknowledge the victimization. If I tell you, you know what, I experienced abuse when I was growing up, you say, oh, that's awful, and how'd you deal with that, blah, blah, blah. But it's really, it's not the cornerstone of who I am. It's not what I'm about. And the same would hold true for anybody else who's been victimized. While they're processing it, it might seem like this is their whole world. I've been victimized. And that might be the only thing they can focus on for a little while. And everybody has that. Everybody has that time period where they have to deal with it. And sometimes they have to deal with it with you or with whoever. And that time period can be variable. But you should start seeing over time, you should start seeing like these moments where it's okay. You know what I mean? So it's not always amped up really high and the anxiety's there. You should start seeing times where it starts coming down a little bit or there's quietness about them. And it'll only last for a little while, a couple of minutes here and there. I mean, that's all you're looking for. It might take, months or years to get over it. Brett Favre was a quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. He talked about living with a father who was an alcoholic. And his father was pretty verbally abusive. And when Brett received the third MVP, he called his dad up. He was told that he was going to receive the MVP. The first person he called was his dad because he really wanted his dad's love and adoration and support. And his father said to him, "What took you so long?" and hung up the phone. Those are all forms of abuse. That's so. And what that did with Brett's life is it forced him to become, in quotes, a better football player. I don't know if that's necessarily the truth or not, depending upon if you're a Bears fan or Vikings fan or whoever. But it forced him to work harder. Is that good or bad? I don't know. But it clearly didn't bring that anxiety down. You see what I mean? Whereas if his dad said, "Really, 3 times? That's amazing." How would that have changed Brett Favre? How would that have changed his career? Hopefully it would have brought it down some. But that's not how his dad chose to respond. So, now, somebody enabling sin. Can we do that? Sure. Is it possible to enable sin? Yeah. Do we want to do that? I definitely don't want to. Have I done it? Yes. Not knowingly, though. You go along, and what I usually do for me is I just say, okay, if this person is going to con me and basically try to manipulate me with this, that's between them and God. I'm going to do what I think is right, and I'm going to help you out where I can, and where I can't, I'm going to tell you I can't. It doesn't mean I don't love you as a brother or sister in Christ. It's just that, here's the line, and you set boundaries, and you show them love when you can. And if they are trying to manipulate, that's between them and God, and I don't usually try to make that call. They know. I mean, over time, it comes out, and you'll figure it out too. It'll come out probably right in front of you. Like, oh, there you have it. Yeah. So, is there more to that question? Did I say that?
I guess not right now.
Okay.
Thanks.
I have a question. How do you find someone, someone you can trust if you're looking for someone to help them? I mean, it's like, it's hard to find. I mean, what do you do, open up the book, the phone book and say, okay, is this one okay or this?
Right.
I mean, how do you go about finding somebody you can?
That is an excellent question, and that's not my way of saying I'm not going to answer that, but it is. I used to be a clinic manager, and people that I supervised, I worked in a government agency. I supervised about 35 various level clinicians, ranging from psych techs all the way to psychiatrists. And there were therapists that I wouldn't send my neighbor's dog to, and I hated that dog. So that I supervised. And then there were therapists that I wanted to go to because they were that good. What you look for is you call the therapist up. You call, when you're looking for a therapist, you call up and you'll get the front desk. You always get the scheduling. And you say to the scheduler, hey look, I know you're going to put me in the next available slot, but this is what I'm looking for. I want a female or a male, whichever. These are the issues that I'm worried about. Can you figure out a way to get me into a person that I can see that specializes in this and is a Christian? You throw that in there, and the front desk person should automatically go, okay, none of these guys. These guys aren't going to fit. And you throw that Christian word out there, please God, let this be right consistently, the front desk should respond accordingly, that you're looking for a Christian counselor. And that's going to help you, and that's going to guide you a lot. Now, once you get in there and you start asking that counselor and say, hey, look, you know what if I'm thinking about an abortion? What are you going to say to me about abortions? From that Christian perspective. What if I'm thinking about divorce? What if I'm thinking about, and what is that? You ask them questions. They don't get to ask all the questions. You're paying them. They're your employee. Now, a lot of therapists don't like that because therapists really like to think that they know everything. They don't, not by a long shot, but they like that. But ask those hard questions to kind of vet them. And if you get something that you don't really like, just say, hey, do you know any other Christian counselors? I don't know if this is going to fit for us, and they should make a referral for you. By law, they're supposed to at that point.
So kind of the same thing if you're doing it for somebody?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Same thing.
Trying to do a dry run with
Yep.
yourself?
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
Some therapists are really good about letting you come in, kind of the first session free, kick the tires as it were, tell them a little bit about what you're thinking about, what you need. A lot of therapists I know in the state of Wisconsin, most therapists do that. I mean, that's just, to my mind, that's just good business. It makes good business sense. But some therapists, some clinics are like, no, we want billable hours all the time. That's all we want. So they don't allow for that. So you'll have to kind of feel that out. But it's a difficult process. Once you find a good one, tell pastor. Make sure you tell people, hey, this is a good one, okay? This is, they're not all crazy. They're not like, let's worship, Wiccan, pagan gods, that kind of thing. They're Christians, or make sure your pastor knows. So, other questions?
Yeah. Well, thanks for your presentation, and you covered a lot of ground, and really appreciate everything you just had to say. When it comes to depression, how do you, I know you even referred to staying away from language that would suggest the person is at fault
Right.
in this, what they're bringing on themselves. But then when you reference King David, you see David really taking, a lot of this in repentance too.
Yes.
Because he knows
Right. He knows,
things.
He's linked it to his sin.
Right. So when you're approaching a person that's suffering from depression, to what degree should you be expecting them to take responsibility if it is tied to sins, whether it's just, an unwillingness to, go to church or whatever it might be that's really troubling them. Should you stay away from that kind of talk where they're taking responsibility for this?
I think, in dealing with folks who've been depressed, I say to them right out, okay, this is where we get into that gray area, and I don't know what's going on in your head, and should you get some spankings? Yes. Should you be beaten about the head and shoulders, with a ball peen hammer for the rest of your life? No. I think it's somewhere in between there. I don't know how to figure that out, but let's talk more. And sometimes I'm going to say things that are going to sound really, really painful, and ask me about them. You need to ask me about them. And so you're putting some onus on them to talk to you about it. There's no way you can kind of easily tease those things apart. So you have to rely on that other person to be strong enough to say some things, and either in their defense or, okay, yeah, Pastor, you're kind of right, yeah, I probably should be going to church more, but, I really like to sleep in. What about that rest thing that Dean said? I should be sleeping in on Sunday. Dean said. So you have, that, but it's that constant balance where you're constantly checking and probing. So.
Yeah. So I hear you kind of going back to where you're at with the angry God versus the loving God.
Yes.
How you're using law and
Yes,
gospel.
right.
So what would fruits of faith look like in a depressed person's life? What could you expect? What are the more things you might miss that would be fruits of faith?
Wow. That's a really good question.
And you can come back for another seminar too.
Yeah, these folks have got to wake up. They're like, oh, come on, really? You're going to feed me again? Why don't you just dart me and put me in That's the fruits of faith. Wow. For the depressed. This is going to sound really, really harsh, but literally sitting up sometimes in bed. That's huge. At one point I was doing what's called in-home psychotherapy, and I'm a huge advocate, I'm still a huge advocate of in-home psychotherapy. It's where the therapist goes to the client's house. You learn so much about an individual by going into their homes and being trusted by them to come into their homes. It's an amazing process. You become part of their family. And no, you don't eat all their food and stuff like that, but they come to kind of count on you. You become part of the family. It's a very interesting process. I've worked with people who literally were so depressed they couldn't get out of bed, and they wet the bed. So just getting out of bed for some, depending on their level of depression, it can be that extreme. That's rare, but that would be an extreme example. More often than not, it's a sense of finding peace with the Lord. What does their prayer time look like? And prayer includes that music component. And I don't know where you are with music, in that, do they have to listen to only hymns? I see you have the supplement here, so you are a bit more modern. That's good. So I don't know where music fits into the whole schema of church and worship. Okay, I'll admit it. I was listening to Casting Crows on the way down here. Okay, enough. Sleep deprivation. I'm telling you. But it's those are some of the things that you have to kind of integrate into that to help bring them out. And the fruits are going to be, comparatively speaking, very, very small. So, and very hard to see sometimes. Any other questions? Well, thank you for having me.
Well, thanks, Dean, and I think we all have plenty to chew on and reflect on. If anybody has follow-up questions with me, you can always send me an email or something like that. And then I appreciate any feedback you get as far as how helpful this was. We hope to take the recording we have and make it available to other people in the CLC too. So if you know somebody that you think could benefit from this, we'll make that available on a DVD or on our website. I think that pretty much concludes it, unless there's any last comments. our thoughts, and we wish Dean blessings on his travels and his work, and his, what did you call it, the new phase that you're kind of entering into. So may the Lord bless you, and thank you very much.